The waiting is almost over. F1 testing 2019 is finally upon us. By the time you're watching this, we're probably going to be in Spain already. But we're getting this filming in early so we can talk to you about the things we're most looking forward to seeing when we get to Barcelona and testing finally kicks off when we see the new cars running in anger for the first time. Ed Straw and Scott Mitchell are here to run me through the things they'll be looking for most closely when we get into the paddock. And Scott, let's kick off with you. What is the first topic when you walk through the doors on the first day of testing? What's going to be the first thing on your mind? What are you going to be looking for? What do you want to see?
So the thing I'm looking forward to most when I get there, I'm not going to be looking out for it. I'm going to be listening out for it. It'll be the fire up of the Honda in the Red Bull garage and listening for any power tools or anything like that after the first run to see if they're having to grind off any parts for cooling or anything like that. Bit of a throwback to the early V6 turbo hybrid era years in testing. Red Bull Honda is just, it could be the defining story of F1 2019. So they hit the ground running, literally, in a Silverstone shakedown that left Max Verstappen smiling. So I think that's a good sign, personally. We know that those shakedowns can trigger all sorts of nerves and tensions and trepidation for the season ahead if it goes wrong or you don't make it or anything like that. So I think that first day, how much mileage they do, how the engine sounds, what even performance on the first day, what the sort of vibe is coming from the team and from Honda, that's just, for me, that's not just day one, that's the whole first test, second test as well, and the first few months of the season. Red Bull Honda is the #1 story for me.
And I think all of F1 fans will be excited about this as well, because this is the team that can be the great disruptor for the season. It can get involved in the Mercedes versus Ferrari fight, even if they're not a championship contender in their own right this year. They can A, show that they're on the path to becoming one, and B, really spice up that battle at the front.
Now, Scott, your next topic is one that I'm fascinated to see as well, and that's the new man at Ferrari, Charles Leclerc. What are you expecting from him?
I'm expecting to see pace straight out the box every time he's driven a Ferrari way back in 2017 and last year at the end of the season in Abu Dhabi. It's always been impressive. We know he's super quick, so that's not the issue. The thing that's going to be curious for me on pace will be at the end of that first week, even though it's different days and you never know what programs anyone's running or anything like that. How does he compare to Vettel? What's it looking like? What's Charles' body language going to be like at the end of each day? How open is he going to be with the media? And I'm curious because obviously Ferrari are into this sort of new phase in 2019. They seem to be being a bit more open media-wise at the start of the year. They've got new media people in. So, you know, are we going to get any messaging from the team about Charles and how he's fitting in? I think it's just him versus Vettel, again, it's one of the big stories of the season. Are we going to see more from Vettel because of it? Is Vettel going to get sort of put into the corner a little bit and be in the shadows? So getting the first signs of that and working out how that battle's going to go is going to be absolutely mega.
I should remember as well that for all Charles Leclerc will have said, yes, I want to fit in, be the second driver, you know, work my way in. He wants to go in and get as much of the team as possible behind him. So it's important for him as well. These are his first, what you might term, serious days working with the race team. So they'll be quite important for him in terms of setting the tone for the season to come.
Now, Ed, it's not all about what Scott's looking for. You're going to be there as our Grand Prix editor and writing a lot of our Autosport Plus content during a time that some of the deep dive analysis that we have to do. An unenviable task during testing. So what are the things that you're going to be looking out for when you get there?
Well, for me, it's not something specific. It's not one thing, but it's an area of the cars, and it's illustrated very well by the Alfa Romeo here. And it's the front wings. We've seen the Alfa with this very unusual cutaway area down here, a very different treatment and approach. We've seen other teams with slightly less aggressive versions of that and hints in that kind of direction. So it's going to be really interesting because some teams have launched with fairly basic front wings that look quite literal interpretations of the regulations, and we were expecting to see some things in this direction. So it'll be really fascinating to see what teams turn up with versions that might be closer to this, whether we'll see different iterations of the launch front wings as testing goes on. And this could go all the way up to the end of testing and to Melbourne, with people and teams trying to understand what works, whether this approach is the best way to kind of recreate that outwash effect where they get the airflow driven outwards. So that'll be fascinating, and that'll tell us a lot about what the look of Formula One will be over this season, because this is very striking. I mean, anyone could look at that and see straight away what is unusual about it, because the front wing basically almost starts to disappear there in terms of the upper elements. So yeah, fascinating to see what the trend will be. Whatever happens, we will gradually over time see convergence if there is a significant difference in terms of the performance potential of these approaches.
I'd also say that I'm very curious to see the effect of this, because let's not forget the reason that we're seeing front wings like this is all part of simpler aero for this year to make the cars easier to follow, and the idea is that will promote better racing and the spectacle will improve. So next week in Barcelona, that will be the first time we have the cars on track with each other, and already a couple of drivers are making noise about wanting to sort of get close to a car in front and actually see if they can feel the effect themselves. So we'll get the first hints in reality of whether these new regulations, the reason these cars look like this, have actually done what they're set out to do.
Yeah, I'm not sure we should be too optimistic about that effect being very strong. Ed, as well as going over the data, you'll spend a lot of time trackside when you're at testing. What sort of things can you gauge from watching cars running effectively in isolation on a cold day in Barcelona? There's still quite a lot you can learn about maybe the cars that look good and the ones who are in trouble.
Well, what you see is dynamically how the cars perform. That doesn't lie. A car won't do what it can't do, and it will do what it can do. So you're looking for the balance of the car, how much the drivers are having to interact with the car to make it do things. Are there lots of steering adjustments and throttle adjustments and that kind of thing? Sometimes conditions play a part. I remember the Toro Rosso, I think it was last year, looked really bad initially because they just couldn't get the front tyres running. It was so cold. They weren't the only ones, but it's really pronounced. It's like they barely had any front end grip, and that gradually went away. But you can pick up handling traits. I remember relatively early in testing, watching at the chicane at the back end of the circuit and seeing Van Dorn on track, and there was quite a lot of low speed instability, rear instability under braking. And I remember asking Van Dorn about that later on, and that was a trait of the car, the rear end instability, all through the season of the McLaren. It was one of the big problems they had. So you do see the hints of these things. And yeah, it's always a snapshot. You're never going to get a decisive answer on it, but you can also compare it with what the drivers say. So if the driver says, "Oh no, it's a joy to drive," and you think, "Well, hang on a minute, everywhere I see you, you're soaring at the wheel and you're making a lot of inputs," you know there might be something going on there. You know, a good car will generally be quite benign and usable out of the box, and it won't be every single lap. You know, it takes a while before you get long runs that will tell you anything, but you can get a feel for the direction of the cars and what's working, what's not working, and then as testing goes on, who gets more on top of it. You could see with the Williams last year, the rear end instability, that they mitigated it to an extent, but not completely. Whereas sometimes cars just look good and look handleable, and you think, well, actually, if the driver's able to do what they want with it, that's pretty promising. It doesn't necessarily mean it's super fast, but it means everything's working. And when it comes to the complex aero of these cars, it's the way everything fits together. It's all about managing the airflow. It's hugely complicated, and it's sending vortices all over the place and interaction of high pressure and low pressure areas. So it's very complicated. And if the car is working and you're minimising the stalls you're getting and things are working basically okay, the car should be relatively predictable. Whereas if you watch, particularly turns 1, 2, 3 are interesting. Turn 2 into 3 is very interesting because you've got a transition as they come out the left-hander into the fast long right-hander, and that long right-hander, if you've got good downforce, if you've got a good car balance, the car will kind of behave all the way through it. If it's all over the place, you can't help but see it. I remember the 2012 Ferrari looked really bad. I remember watching there with Gary Anderson, as we will be.
That car looked bad standing still.
Well, that's pretty true. But this is where the cars come to life, and you start to get hints at what they can do, and that's what's really exciting, because ultimately that's a car. I can see it. Everything looks in the right place, but it's when it's moving that it comes alive, and that's what testing starts to be about.
I know that Ed's obviously looking forward to seeing a lot of stuff. I started by saying what I'm looking forward to listening out for, and it'll be the same when it comes to performance as well, because last year when we had everyone going for their performance runs, and you'd see the timing screen would light up and go, "Oh, he's just done the best first sector so far, second sector so far," and then you go, right, okay, listening for them coming out for the finish line, and then you wait and you hear the lift. And we've had that with Mercedes, we've had that with Ferrari, because there's just that little bit of gamesmanship. And I know
but that doesn't trick the teams, does it? Let's be honest. If we know that they've lifted, then they know that they've lifted.
I've been there for testing and done it for Autosport Live before, and all I've done is I've gone immediately into my spreadsheet with everyone else's sector times, and I've just put their their best final sector in with the 2 sectors they've just done, and gone, okay, well, here's a hypothetical lap. Oh, look, they're a second and a half up the road.
I remember we saw one last year when McLaren started to pick up a bit of pace, and McLaren did an amazing lap at one stage, but actually the chicane had missed, which sometimes happened. They had that period where they did one really good lap, which was pretty much the maximum they could do, and they took a whole chunk off it through that cutting the chicane.
Was that Alonso practising his Abu Dhabi Grand Prix corner cutting?
Oh yeah, pretty much. Yeah, he finished his the season, perhaps his Grand Prix career, with those rapid. Yeah, it's three in succession, wasn't it? So there's all sorts of games and tricks going on, but ultimately, like I said before, you can't hide the performance. A car can do what it can do. You have to make a lot of assumptions about fuel load and programs and that kind of thing. But as testing progresses, you do get a picture of what's going on. That's the reason why I like seeing the cars on track. Purely a look at lap times alone tells you very, very little. It tells you they can do that lap time. That's certainly the case, but you don't know what conditions. But it's piecing all these bits of information together, and that's what you see from the car on track, what the drivers are saying, what rivals are saying. And all these bits of information come together to give you a reasonable pointer of where things are at. Things can always change. It's not as accurate a pointer as Melbourne qualifying will be. But by the time you get to the end of testing, you start to get a reasonable idea of where everything stands. And even on the first few days of testing, you start to get a feeling for who's in a good way, who's in a bad way. That's what testing's about.